Okay, so the time is 1300 hours sharp. Welcome to this presentation. My name is Falkvinge. I'm the founder of the Swedish and first Pirate Party. Since after founding founding and leading the Swedish Pirate Party for 5 years, putting 2 people in the European Parliament, I now travel the world and speak about the ideas and the underlying conflict. So thank you very much for inviting me to the Forum International Software Livre. Before I continue, is there anybody here who does not understand English? Nobody ever raises their hand to that question. I love that. So, a brief introduction. Before we start, I'm Falkvinge on Twitter. I love seeing my name on Twitter. Any criticism, any comments you have, I love to see them. And for your convenience, it's also included on every slide if you should forget it. So, a brief introduction. How many in here have heard of the Swedish Pirate Party before? Let's see a show of hands. Okay, I'd say that's about half to 2/3, which is amazingly so consistent across the entire planet that I'm putting it in the slides. So just for kicks, how many in here have heard of any other Swedish political party? Okay, that's usually scattered hands, but I can't see a single one now. And isn't that kind of funny? Doesn't that tell you something? It tells me that there is a global undercurrent of new values coming, that we're cooperating across the globe in making something big happen. And I'll be talking just a little bit today about how big this something is. So, for those of you who haven't heard about us before, we love the net, we love copying, we love sharing, and we love civil liberties. For that, some people call us pirates. Rather than feeling ashamed over that, as I think was their intention, we decided to stand tall about it. And as a result, we've now put many people in parliaments, starting with 2 people in the European Parliament in 2009, and continuing in Germany, expecting more success at this fall in Netherlands. And we exist in 56 countries at last count. So, we started in Sweden. We've now spread pretty much all over the world, being this global undercurrent. Today's talk is called Copyright Regime versus Civil Liberties. I'll go a little bit into how the copyright monopoly threatens our most fundamental civil liberties. It is much more than being just a distribution monopoly. We'll be talking about how truth is power, how the game of economic dominance is playing out and always has played out, as well as how part of this dominance game is about kicking away the ladder. When I speak to sociologists about the net, about the internet, and the changes the net's bringing, they generally divide into 2 groups. The first group tell me that the net is the largest invention of mankind since the printing press in 1535, about 500 years ago. The second group disagrees with this in terms of power shift and power structures, and says that the net is the largest invention of mankind since the written language, 6,000 years ago. So that kind of sets the stage that the internet might be a little upsetting to some existing interests. As as we look to understand this, we observe the Catholic Church before the printing press, and we see that everything that happened then is repeating now. That doesn't just give us an understanding of the people involved in this fight. That also gives us a blueprint for moving ahead. Before the printing press, the Catholic Church had an absolute monopoly. Had an absolute monopoly on knowledge and culture. Whatever the village parish said was true was, as an objective sense, as you can come, the truth. Books were copied laboriously by hand by monks and nuns in cloisters. And then, in this setting where everything was orderly, there was a complete consensus on what was true and what was false, came the printing press. All of a sudden, the middle class got an ability to publish unsanctioned ideas, unfiltered culture. The church's monopoly on holding the truth was being challenged. And this is the greatest power of all that anybody can hold in humanity. If you can tell the world what is true and what is false, if you imagine that you can write all the world's newspaper for a week, some think in terms of being rich, getting a lot of money, the world owing them a lot of money. Other things think in terms of getting famous, but it doesn't stop there. If you can control what is true, you don't need money ever again in your life. You could be a walking God on the planet if you can control people's worldview. The Catholic Church never needed to fear any laws being made against their interests, for they controlled what the legislators knew. That is why the printing press was so dangerous to the order of the world in this time. And that is why the penalties for using a printing press gradually increased all over Europe from its inception in 1535. It arrived in 1453, and the penalties for using the printing press gradually increased until it hit the death penalty. In France, on January 13, 1535, you would be executed for unauthorized copying. It didn't work either. So what we learned from this little episode of history is that truth is power. The ability to copy is power. People who claim to control or seek to control what other people know will strike down on their ability to copy and to share. We also learned that even the death penalty didn't work. You'll hear me speaking on alternate causes. In the UK, or England at the time actually, Queen Mary, also known as Bloody Mary, took a different approach. Seeing the utter failure in France's death penalty for unauthorized copying, she instead went to the London's Printing Guild and offered them a monopoly in return for being able to censor anything printed. So there was an unholy alliance forged between industry and the royalty in order to strike down on free speech and on freedom of expression and on political opinions, which in this day and age were pretty much identical to those of religion. This monopoly was called the copyright monopoly. It was instituted on May 4, 1557, and it is still around. Queen Mary, however, died the next year, so she isn't. What we learn from this is something very consistent throughout history. Powerful people use their power to keep their power. And that is a lot of what this presentation is about. We'll be looking at how truth as power is consistent. We'll be looking at the game of economic dominance and how that... Truth and the ability to verify sources when the Catholic Church had the Bible printed in Latin, all of a sudden got it printed in people's own languages. People could verify sources, and how that became a complete challenge to the power of its time. We can observe the exact same parallel today, as people are starting to demand that newspapers publish sources. You got this story, okay, where did you get it from? Citation needed. That challenges authority, and authority doesn't like being challenged. The last time this happened with the printing press, it led to 100 years of religious wars across Europe. And I'm hoping that we can get off a little bit more peacefully this time. That, however, depends entirely on just how hard the incumbent industries and the incumbent powers are prepared to fight for their privileges. And I'm not joking here. Those who sit on the power and money are not giving it up without a fight. And I'll be coming back to how we can take that fight to them. So, sharing is good. How many agree with that statement? Sharing knowledge, sharing culture. Almost everybody. So, assuming that we might even be breaking a couple of monopolies here, called patent monopolies, or sharing, or copyright monopolies, how many would still agree that sharing would be morally right? Let's see a show of hands. Still quite a few, not everybody. The thing is, you'll notice that I'm talking about a copyright monopoly. Some would insist that copyright is a natural right, and I'm going to show why it is not. Some say that copyright is a form of property, and I'm going to show you why it is not. When I buy a chair, I have the receipt here, right here in my pocket. Actually, that was a taxi receipt, but I have a receipt here in my pocket. And this chair is made out of a master drawing at a plant. It is one chair out of many ones like it, but this one is mine. That means there are certain things I can do with this chair. I can take it apart and use the parts of it for new projects of mine. I can put it out on the porch for neighbors to use. I can look at how it's done and make identical copies and sell them at my wish. I can look at patterns in nature. I can draw those on the chair. I can reshape the chair to anything I like. All of this is normal for property. This is what property is about. The ability to do what you like with your physical objects that you hold the receipt to. Now, if I were instead to buy a DVD, I cannot take this apart, take the contents of this apart, and use it for new projects. I cannot look at how this DVD is done, make identical copies, and sell them. I cannot use it out on the porch and charge my neighbors for it, despite the fact that I hold the receipt right here in my hand, just like I did with a chair. Despite the fact that this, just like the chair, is a copy made from a master drawing at a plant somewhere. There are many ones like this DVD, but this one would be mine. If I buy a hard drive, there are some bit patterns that I cannot write to it, like those from the DVD. despite the fact that I own this hard drive. This is my property. So which I could do with a chair, which is normal for property. So what we arrive at is the conclusion that the copyright monopoly is not a property right. It is a limitation on property rights. The copyright monopoly is a limitation on property rights. That does not automatically mean it is bad, but it definitely means that you can never justify this monopoly from the standpoint that property is good, because you will end up in the opposite conclusion. So, it is not only a monopoly originally designed to strike down on free speech and freedom of expression. It is also has absolutely nothing to do with morals. Whenever a dominant player, it could be a dominant industry, it could be a dominant geopolitical player, tries to safeguard its interests, it always tries to tell the world that it would somehow be immoral, maybe illegal, but definitely immoral, to challenge them, to say that I don't think it's right that you should have this benefit over all of the rest of us. And this is exactly what we are seeing with the patent monopolies and the copyright monopolies, that breaking them should somehow be immoral. It's not. When I asked, is sharing good, just a couple of minutes back, most people in this room raised their hands, and I agree. It is this monopoly which is immoral, and it's being used to keep down the rest of the world from challenging those in power today. Let me show you how. But before we get there, let me also go into how this threatens the civil liberties, not just of us, but of our children. Let's imagine a letter in the mail sent 40 years ago. When we sent that letter in the mail, there were some things that we associated with it. It is a physical letter. It is sealed, maybe not with a wax seal, but at least with glue on the envelope. When we send that in the mail to a recipient, it is secret. It didn't take? Yeah, there we go. It is secret. Even if we are sending a copied drawing in the mail, nobody is going to open the letter in transit and see what it contains, just to make sure it doesn't contain a copied drawing. It is anonymous. When we send a letter in the mail, we and we alone determine if we identify ourselves as sender on the inside of the letter for only the recipient to know, on the outside of the envelope for anybody in the distribution chain to know, or, frankly, not at all. And that is us who decides this. It is untracked. Nobody in the mail distribution system is allowed to keep track of who is communicating with whom. And, of course, our right to stay anonymous is yet another safeguard for this. And last but not least, there is messenger immunity. The mailman is never responsible for the contents of the sealed message. These are rights that our parents and grandparents fought, bled, and died for, to give to us. And I think it is absolutely reasonable that our children have the same rights in their environment. Now, the copyright industry, once you say this, will jump up and down and complain that you can't be serious about this. You can't seriously say or suggest that anybody should be able to send anything to anybody without us being able to prevent it. Well, yes, I am serious about that. Because if it was never an issue of somebody making enough money before we had our civil liberties. This is entirely regardless of somebody's ability to make money. An entrepreneur's job is to make money given the current constraints, technical and societal constraints of society. They do not get to dismantle civil liberties, even, and I repeat, even if they can't make money otherwise. If the copyright industry cannot survive in the face of sustained civil liberties, then the copyright industry needs to die, and we need to maintain our civil liberties. New industries will come and replace them. That is not going to be a problem. New jobs are going to come and replace them. That is not going to be a problem. But replacing our civil liberties would be a problem. That about truth and civil liberties. Let's go a little bit about economic dominance and the kicking away the ladder game. When Britain was the dominant economic player globally about 150 years ago, it had decided that all raw materials must go to Britain, be refined there, and then be exported again as luxury goods to the rest of the world. In this way, by preventing the sharing of knowledge, by preventing others to rise to their potential, Britain maintained superiority. It was a global game of pretending to help others by giving them the ability to buy luxury items, but in reality kicking away the ladder and preventing them from challenging the dominant player. Then came a fella named Samuel Slater. He was a bright young guy. You could probably call him a geek of sorts in terms of his ability to inhale vast quantities of information and then repeating it. Because in violation of British laws at the time, he memorized the entire drawings of the British cotton mill, which was key to the textile industry of Britain at this time. You weren't allowed to copy the drawings, so he memorized them, all of them. And he went to the United States of America and built the country's first cotton mill. Against horrible threats of punishment in Britain, he's now called the father of industry of the United States of America for this violation of ban on sharing. Father of US industry. So now that the United States of America has become the dominant player, they are doing the exact same thing. They are pretending to help other players, while in reality kicking away the ladder. And this is predominantly done by mechanisms of copyright monopolies and patent monopolies. Let me tell you a story about American cars. In the 1960s, American cars were cars made in the USA, were the proudest thing you could have in the USA. And then something happened. Toyota happened. Somebody outside of the United States of America made better cars than the gas-guzzling noisy and generally horrible United States cars. And the fact that United States citizens started buying Japanese cars was such a shock to the psyche of this country that it's very hard to comprehend for people outside. And everybody in the industry realized that very, very soon the United States would not be able to produce any industrial goods of value. If it was not even able to produce its own pride, that ridiculously oversized cars, to be commercially competitive, it would soon be a has-been on the global dominance market. So a lot of players started thinking, a lot of committees were tasked with answering one question: how will the United States maintain a global economic dominance without producing anything of value? And the answer came in terms of redefining producing, value, useful, and industry. More specifically, it came in terms of tying its trade representatives with its foreign policy, something that had never been done before, and which was seen as so daring, people weren't sure if it was even going to work. The idea was to create so-called free trade deals that were in reality horribly lopsided to favor United States industries by means of copyright monopolies and patent monopolies. The US would essentially rent out drawings, get finished products in return, and pretend it's a fair deal. At this time, in 1980s, did the United States join the Berne Convention for copyright monopolies. It had not been in the United States' interest to join it before, but seeing that you're going to base your future dominance on the copyright monopoly and patent monopolies, you needed to look credible. So the United States was one of the last countries on the planet to join this convention. The deal that was brokered was called TRIPS. It was created as a treaty between many different players on the planet and started out hijacking a previous group called GATT, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. And it was later, which was later renamed to the World Trade Organization, the WTO. This effort was driven by the United States' ambition of maintaining global economic dominance while not producing anything of industrial value. This might sound outrageous, shocking, even lunatic, but this is all very well documented in terms of who were the players behind it. Unfortunately, I cannot fit the entire history of it into a 40-minute slot. Some of the players behind it were the copyright industries, who, by the way, you might have heard of Hollywood being the hot seat of film industry, Hollywood being located in the far southwest side of the United States. The reason for that was that it used to be, the film industry used to be located in New York City. But Thomas Edison had a lot of patent monopolies on filmmaking, and he was very aggressive in pursuing those patent monopolies and getting licenses, getting royalties. So the entire film industry packed up, moved across the entire country just to be able to ignore the patent monopolies, and took a new deal in Hollywood. Again, once you're at the top, you're kicking away the ladder. Pharma industries were also one of the drivers behind the TRIPS agreement and the World Trade Organization. The initial initiative is even said to have come from Edmund Pratt, who was then the CEO of FISL, writing under the pseudonym Barry McTaggart in New York Times in 1982 in an article called Stealing from the Mind. As you notice, I can rabble tons of details about this, but never mind that. But the pharma industries, again, were created and founded in a place where there were no patent monopolies. In Switzerland, you have Novartis, for instance. So these industries were founded in an environment where they could flourish, where innovation and creativity was open to all. And now it's a game of kicking away the ladder. I don't think we should accept that. And they even have the goals to pretend it's all done in the name of moral. History repeats itself. It was the exact same thing during the religious wars when the then Catholic Church, and for that matter later Protestant Church, tried to tell the world it's moral that you obey us. No, it's not. It's moral that we share. It's moral that we share observations, knowledge, freedom, and culture. If you want an example of this, look at Russia's accession to the WTO. How many here remember a streaming radio station or music store called allofmp3.com? Let's see a show of hands. A few. So this was a store in Russia that sold MP3s. It had prices that way undercut anything in the western parts of the world. And under Russian laws, it was a radio station. It was fully legal. But when Russia wanted to get into the World Trade Organization, you had US and Russia on opposite sides of the negotiating table. Two formerly mortal enemies who had held each other at nuclear gunpoint for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And what did the United States could have asked for anything, absolutely anything. So, what was the most important thing in the world? It was to close a bloody music store. This tells you just how important these monopolies are to the game of global dominance. This goes way beyond ethics. This goes much, much beyond the concepts of property or force or trade. This is a game of dominance, plain and simple. It is a game of geopolitical dominance. And there's no reason why anybody should agree to play this game on lopsided terms. There are more examples. You have, there are many, many more examples of incumbents. One famous example is the so-called Red Flag Act of the United Kingdom. When the automobile came to the United Kingdom, laws were enacted that forced anybody driving a car, an automobile, to have a crew of 3 people in this automobile. You would have the driver, the stoker, as in the guy handling the engine, and a person going in front of the car waving a red flag, saying, "Here comes a car." Essentially, what that did was limit cars to walking speed, severely limiting their usefulness. Much later, it was determined that this law was a result of lobbying from the stagecoach and railroad industries, who did not want to see the automobile threaten their business. So you have this pattern of pretending to embrace a new phenomenon, but in reality, only embracing it in as much as it doesn't threaten your position. That was the case with the Red Flag Act. That is the case with how the copyright industries handle the net. They pretend to embrace it, but try to kill anything that threatens their dominant position. So, Brazil is in a globally unique position to break this spell. Europe is doing the best it can to follow the United States into oblivion. The United States is bankrupt, has been bankrupt for over 40 years. The European Union thinks it can be just as good as the United States if it only copies the mistakes of the United States well enough. But out of the emerging economies, Brazil, China, Russia, India, and some count in South Africa there, my impression is definitely that Brazil is in the most interesting position of all to break this spell, because Brazil is so far ahead in realizing the potential of the net, in bringing people to their full potential. Whenever the net brings something to everybody, it brings the ability to have a voice, to share your observations, to share your impressions and reflections. For the first time in history, a 9-year-old schoolgirl in Paraguay who just got her first laptop under the One Laptop Per Child program has exactly as strong a voice as mine, which happens to be that of a middle-aged white male, just lucky enough to be born in the privileged parts of the world. And I think that's absolutely beautiful. Only some people are fighting against it. So Brazil can foster laws that'll make the incumbent industries obsolete. In reality, they already are obsolete. They are just causing so much damage in pretending they're still adding something of value. Foster free software that helps with sharing of knowledge and culture, not to say the least transparency of government, which is going to be key for the next generation that demands participation on a scale never seen before. Safeguard the messenger immunity, which we spoke about. The copyright industries are attacking the ISPs all across the world to try to make them liable for what we as citizens do online, essentially creating an extrajudicial censorship regime. The messenger's immunity is absolutely critical going ahead, as well as net neutrality, which goes hand in hand with that. Net neutrality is absolute key to getting the next generation of industries. Again, safeguarding the incumbent industries is not what is important. It is providing the most fertile ground for the next generation of citizens and the next generation of entrepreneurs. We are fostering internet access as a citizen's right. This, perhaps, is key. Today, we are exercising our freedom of speech, our freedom of expression, our freedom of the press, and our freedom of opinion through the net. And therefore, critically, the net has itself become just as fundamental a right as the other rights that we exercise through it. There are people in Brazil who understand this. Brazil is on the right course in general about this, much more so than most of the rest of the world. You have an initiative called Marco Civil, which is the first of its kind in the world in recognizing that access to the net is a requirement to exercise citizenship. That single sentence will lead to so much better policy than following the United States' footsteps and asking to be and dancing to their tune. So, Brazil is in a geopolitically unique position of breaking out from this, being able to break out from this spell. It might be an unintended consequence to bankrupt a corrupt system with the United States in the lead, but that's just an unintended consequence of caring for your own entrepreneurs and citizens, which I think, frankly, every nation should do. So, citizens, entrepreneurs, creativity and innovation first. It is not in Brazil's, nor indeed in anybody's interest, to be kept down by monopolies that favor the previous generation of industries. If they are going to be bankrupt by developments, let them go bankrupt. That is not Brazil's problem. The world is watching. Brazil can take and has taken the lead. So thank you so much for inviting me to this lovely country. And I'm sincerely hoping, with all the activist power in here, with all the brain power in Brazil, that you keep showing the world what good net policy can look like, even if it happens to upset some of the previously dominant players. Thank you. Okay. So, are there any questions?
Yes, here in your right bottom.
Okay.
Hi Rick, nice to meet you. My name is Paulo Renan. Acted as a manager of the collaboration process of elaborating the Marco Civil of the Internet as I worked for the Ministry of Justice in Brasilia. And now I am a researcher for Center of Technology and Society at FGB. I work with Ronaldo Lemos there. And also I integrate the group that is about to launch the Brazilian Paris Party this Friday and Saturday in Recife. My question directs to an now old article of yours that indicates the word empowerment as a lead word in our flag globally. And I would like to propose to you, as you could make a pun on that empowerment word, and if you can understand, I suggest the word and peer-to-peerment, as not only giving power to the people, but treating the people as peers. And in Portuguese that would work as well as empoderamento instead of empoderamento. That's my question. Thanks for all the work. That's it.
Thank you, and I think it's a very interesting question. Let me reflect a bit on it. Whenever there are new ideologies, new viewpoints, new perspectives coming, they tend to start out as a protest, then politicize into a set of policies that would solve just their protest topic, and then deepen into an ideology from which they can derive policies across the entire spectrum of society. You had this with the labor movement about 80 years ago, which started out protesting exploitation of workers in many parts of Europe, moved on to having a politicization of legalizing labor unions, and then deepened into an ideology of solidarity. 40 years later, you had the same thing again with the Green movement across Europe, where people started out protesting pollution. Well, the protests were pretty much worldwide. From there came a narrow political platform of regulating industry pollution and its behavior, and from there deepened into an ideology of sustainability, which could then radiate from a green platform all over society. The pirate movement is currently in this phase where we started out protesting something, we had a narrow platform solving this, and we are starting to deepen into an ideology. You're all involved in free software. You know what this ideology is. The problem is, it's in our guts. If we are supposed to find one word for it, that is going to be hard. It could be empowerment, like I suggested. It could be peer-to-peerment. It could be pretty much any word. But the thing is, it's going to be us that fill this word with meaning. Just like the labor movement filled solidarity with their context, or the Green movement filled sustainability with their context. So my response is, I'm not too hung up on exactly what word we pick, as long as it's a word that we can communicate and explain what has happened and why is there such a generational gap to people who demand participation in society at a level never seen before, and on top of that, demand to be taken seriously. So I hope that was a response. As in, I think peer-to-peerment is just as good as empowerment, but the key is finding one word, any word, that we fill with our values.
Hello. Rick, my name is Bruno. Hi. When you begin to get familiar with the arguments pro-copyright, you notice there are some of them who are very simple and coarse, and it's easy to figure out where are the flaws. But some of them are more sophisticated, and it's more difficult to fight against them. For example, people say that you have to fund your favorite musician. Yeah, the copyright monopoly it's a way to fund people to foster innovation. And there are people who say that big companies have an interest, will profit from the end of copyright. For example, Google with YouTube. They need content to be able to flow in the internet. So may I ask you to comment on that?
Of course. Thank you for a very good question. First of all, I think if you're in a debate and somebody asks you how the artists will get paid, I think you should point out that under the old copyright monopoly system, 99% of artists were not signed with a label, a copyright monopolized distributor. And out of those who were signed, only 2% ever saw a single cent in royalty. So under the old system, 99.98% never got any money in royalties whatsoever. And I think it's very hard to defend that system out of the standpoint the artists cannot get paid otherwise. The second question, as in there will be nothing flowing in the pipes if we don't have a copyright monopoly. Well, that's plainly false. I mean, that is a pipe dream coming from the imagined self-importance of these record label and movie studio executives sitting, believing they are still somehow relevant in this world. YouTube has 72 hours of video uploaded every minute to it. This is not because of the copyright monopoly. This is despite the copyright monopoly. People creating today has become illegal. So anybody defending this monopoly out of the standpoint that creativity won't flow otherwise are, frankly, not looking at the numbers. I hope that was a good answer.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
One more question.
Em português.
In Portuguese. Okay, I'll put on phones.
Bom, na verdade é mais uma mensagem que eu queria passar. Eu também sou membro do Partido Pirata aqui no Brasil, do coletivo que está trabalhando pela oficialização do partido, que a gente vai estar realizando em Recife no final dessa semana. Na verdade é mais um chamado que a gente queria fazer para todos que estão aqui na palestra, quiserem saber mais sobre o Partido Pirata no Brasil, para estar procurando a gente. Eu, o Paulo Renate, vai estar aqui hoje e amanhã, certo? Eu tenho o Magdos também, que é aqui do Rio Grande do Sul, e a gente vai estar à disposição para quem quiser saber mais sobre o Partido Pirata. Agora, às 12h30, a gente vai estar na Rádio Software Livre, dando uma entrevista ao vivo, mas vamos estar circulando aí pelo FISL, então vou fazer o chamado para todo mundo, quem quiser estar sabendo mais, está procurando a gente. Aqui no Brasil, diferente dos países da Europa, a nossa caminhada é muito mais complicada, né, pelo número de assinaturas de apoio, que é de 500 mil, cerca de 500 mil. Então, o trabalho aqui no Brasil é bem mais demorado do que o da Suécia. Então, a gente precisa de muito apoio de todos que estão aqui para a gente estar conseguindo fazer esse trabalho. Queria, de novo, agradecer a presença do Rick aqui no Brasil, é importante para a gente. Né? E depois a gente vai estar conversando um pouquinho mais sobre algumas outras opiniões que a gente vai estar querendo saber. Mas o convite está aberto. No Brasil, @Partido Pirata BR é o Twitter oficial, e no Facebook também, Partido Pirata BR. Então, todo mundo está seguindo para estar sabendo mais sobre como funciona o movimento aqui no Brasil, tá bom? Obrigado, Rick.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no more questions, then thank you very much for listening to this presentation. I want to again thank FISL for inviting me to this lovely conference and to Brazil. And I hope you have a great continued day. I'll be walking around here. Just feel free to grab me. You can mention my name on Twitter, and I'll respond usually within minutes. Sometimes a bit later, but I always respond to see my name on Twitter. Again, thank you.